Race to the Top is a competitive grant program designed to stimulate and reward states for creating adequate conditions for education innovation and reform. Education innovation and reform includes, but is not limited to, improvement in student performance, closing the achievement gap, increasing graduation rates, adequately preparing students for success at the next level of their education or career, and implementing plans to accelerate in the four core education reform areas. Race to the Top was established on February 17, 2009 when President Obama signed the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 into law. This legislation was created to stimulate our economy, create jobs, and allow financial feasibility and investment in many critical sectors so our nation can prosper in the 21st century. One of the critical sectors that needed attention and funding was education. Under the ARRA, the ED Recovery Act was created, which currently funds Race to the Top. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act allots $4.35 billion for the Race to the Top fund, which is divided into $4 billion for statewide reform grants and $350 million towards supporting states trying to improve the quality of their assessments. President Barack Obama and Secretary of Education Arne Duncan announced the program and its timeline on July 24, 2009. 40 states and the District of Columbia applied during Phase 1, which was due January 2010. By late March of 2010, Phase 1 finalists were announced. Phase 2 decisions were announced in August of 2010 and were open to all states except those that were awarded funding in Phase 1. Phase 3 winners were announced in December of 2011 after a two-part process. However, only states that were finalists but not granted money in Phase 2 were eligible to apply for Phase 3. States must show an interest and efforts for current reform and further improvement in the four core areas of education reform will be more likely to earn the Race to the Top grants. The four core areas include adopting standards and assessments to prepare students for success in college and the workplace, building a comprehensive data system to measure growth and supply information, recruit and develop effective teachers and principals where needed, and turn around lowest achieving schools. The U.S. Department of Education created 6 major selection criteria in which they used to score state applications on a 500-point scale. Each of the 6 major criteria is split further into smaller categories. The first criteria, great teachers and leaders, worth 138 total points, focuses on improving teachers and principals to be more effective, ensuring access to adequate training and resources, creating the path for new teachers and principals, equally distributing effective teachers and principals, and providing support for teacher and principals. This first criterion is a major part of a state's application because the points for this section make up more than a quarter of the entire possible point allocation. The second criteria, state success factors, worth 125 total points, focuses on the state's education reform agenda, its capacity to implement, broaden, and maintain their proposed plans, and showing progress closing the achievement gaps as a result. The third criteria, standards and assessments, worth 70 total points, focuses on adopting common standards and implementing high-quality assessments in their state. The fourth criteria, general selection criteria, worth 55 total points, focuses on commitment to education reform by prioritizing education funding and ensuring adequate conditions for innovative schools such as high-performing charter schools. The fifth criteria, turning around the lowest achieving schools, worth 50 total points, focuses on steering low-achieving schools in the right direction and intervening in the lowest achieving schools and local education agency to ensure better education. The sixth criteria, data systems to support instruction, worth 47 total points, focuses on the implementation of a statewide data system to improve instruction and use state data. There are 6 priorities taken into consideration during the grant application process, one of which boosts an application by 15 points if criteria are met. These priorities do not have to be met to be eligible. However, the more priorities that the states meet, the better chance they have at winning the award. The first priority is the absolute priority. Comprehensive approach to education reform, which can be met if the state addresses the four core education reform areas and the state success factors criteria to ensure that the state is taking a planned approach to education reform. The state must also demonstrate their state and their local education agencies' commitment to education reform and plan to use Race to the Top and other funds to reach the main goals of the Race to the Top grant program. The second priority is the competitive preference priority. Emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, and can be met if the state can meet three standards: offer a challenging curriculum in mathematics, science, technology, and engineering, work with community members in these fields to prepare and encourage teachers in incorporating STEM content through various grades and areas, and prepare students for higher education and careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The four other priorities focus on improving educational outcomes by investing in early education, expanding the statewide data system to allow important policy, procedural, or overall effectiveness questions to be answered easily, proposing a plan for students to have the resources needed to transition and be prepared to succeed from one stage to the next, and creating conditions for educational reform and innovation. Although these 6 factors are not all mandated as a requirement of the Race to the Top grant, it is in the state's favor to try and achieve as many of these or have a plan for as many of these as possible. If all standards are met for the second priority, then the state is awarded 15 points to their application grand total. Although these 6 factors are not all mandated as a requirement of the Race to the Top grant, it is in the state's favor to try and achieve as many of these or have a plan for as many of these as possible. States were categorized for different funding award brackets based on the population of children between ages 5 to 17 in their state. The lowest bracket was $20 to $70 million, and the highest bracket was $350 to $700 million. The Race to the Top awards totaled $4.1 billion over the 3 rounds, reaching approximately 22 million students in 18 states and the District of Columbia. The purpose of Race to the Top was to provide funding as an incentive for states to create plans for comprehensive education reform, and then providing the means for each state's plans to be executed through grants and support. These winning states distributed funds to local school districts for them to implement their proposed plans for education reform from their application. Direct results of the Race to the Top funding allowed local school districts to improve and achieve in the 4 main education reform areas. Let's take Malden, Massachusetts for example. In the past few years, Malden High School has expanded its advanced placement program, hiring more teachers to create smaller classes and hosting 3 mandatory Saturday sessions for each AP Math and Science course for students at Malden High School and the 3 neighboring cities. Just a few years ago, Malden High School also created the College and Career Center, which serves as a resource that connects students with employers, college representatives, and scholarship opportunities, and provides student support to ensure they are ready for their transition into college, the workforce, or the military. Lastly, there were several professional development trainings held throughout the school year covering a range of topics such as incorporating technology in the classroom to aid teachers in being more effective. All of these valuable additions to Malden High School were possible due to the funding from the Race to the Top program. On the state level, Massachusetts tasked its Student Advisory Council with focusing on college and career readiness programs for high school students. The MA Department of Education was also in the midst of revamping their teacher evaluation system to incorporate many more criteria and different forms of evaluation to make it a more fair and representative system. Additionally, Massachusetts made it easier for students in low-performing schools to switch to charter schools. There are split views on the Race to the Top program. Some say it is very beneficial in guiding education reform to where it needs to be, while others argue that it is an ineffective program. The benefits have spanned nationwide, with more than 30 states changing their education policies in hopes of winning grants. Without the incentive of winning a grant, the much-needed reform may never have been initiated. Other benefits include collaboration with key stakeholders such as unions and state legislators. As a result of No Child Left Behind, Our nation's education system was working under 50 different sets of standards, whereas Race to the Top encourages states to adopt the Common Core standards. Some argue that education is a civil right, therefore it is unjust for children in winning states to be the only ones with more opportunities and better education. By emphasizing competition, the majority of low-income and minority students will be left behind. Others also criticize that this federal grant program is an intrusion on state and local control of education. For the upcoming year, we should focus our attention on low-achieving schools. We should also revisit the guidelines for the next round of grant applications to ensure that we are accommodating the current needs in education reform and pushing for improvement in the main. Hope you enjoyed learning about Race to the Top.